You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
Look, I am going to start with a proposition that might make a few of you tuning in a bit uncomfortable.
Oh, I think I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah, well, if you work in software, your job title is probably a complete lie right now.
Spot on. It is an illusion we are all just collectively agreeing to maintain.
Exactly. Because artificial intelligence is taking product management, design, and engineering and basically melting them all down into one massive, unrecognizable blob of work.
And the funny thing is how desperately companies are still trying to pretend those borders exist.
Oh, absolutely. The neat little boxes we put ourselves in, they are completely collapsing.
We spent, what, 20 years building entire corporate identities around these very specific disciplines?
Yeah, you had your design systems people over here, your back-end architecture people over there.
Right, and your product strategists in their own little silo. But when an autonomous agent enters the chat, it does not care about your org chart.
No, it just looks at the goal and starts executing across all those disciplines simultaneously.
It is wild, and it breaks the entire mental model of how we build things.
It really does. I am your vocal technologist guide, and for this Product Thursday session, we are going to look under the hood of this chaotic new reality.
Which is something we desperately need to unpack because the implications are huge.
Right. We are on a mission here to pull apart the mechanics of agent-first engineering, explore why delivering instant value might actually kill a product, and get into why corporate agile frameworks are suddenly becoming a massive liability.
We have to start with the people actually doing the work, though. Or rather, the people who used to do the manual work.
The millennial tech trap. This is my favorite part.
It is a brutal truth about the skills we have been valuing in the tech industry for the last decade.
So true. If you look at anyone who built their career over the last 10 years, including myself here, we basically rewarded them for being incredible at process and execution.
We made process a hard skill.
We really did. We mastered the dark arts of manual ticket management. We learned how to write the perfect user story.
Oh, and negotiating story points in a sprint planning meeting. The endless debates over whether a button change is a 3 or a 5.
Yes. Coordinating a complex release across 5 different teams, we treated that administrative heavy lifting as the actual job.
And look, it was a necessary survival skill because human developers were the ultimate bottleneck.
Right. Execution was slow and expensive.
Exactly.
Wow.
And incredibly prone to miscommunication. So we built these massive administrative layers just to protect the engineering time.
But think about what happens when execution is no longer the bottleneck. AI thrives on execution.
It does. It can write the code, generate the wireframes, draft the JIRA tickets in seconds.
Which makes that entire loop of writing, sizing, and moving tickets entirely redundant. Spending a decade mastering agile rituals is a uniquely tragic modern skill to lose.
It is a bit heartbreaking when you frame it like that. But if the execution is automated, what is the human actually bringing to the table?
Well, Emil Avisar, the head of growth at Anthropic, has a really brilliant perspective on this.
Oh yeah, his take on the shift from execution to alignment.
Spot on. He points out that the durable advantage now is not your ability to code. It is judgment, systems thinking, and organizational power.
That shift fundamentally changes the psychology of the builder. Historically, an engineer needed absolute precision.
Right, because if you are writing code for a compiler, a single missing semicolon breaks the entire application.
Exactly. The compiler does not understand your intent, it only understands your exact syntax. But large language models are probabilistic.
They operate on intent and goals. You do not give them syntax, you give them a direction.
Which is a completely different way of working.
It is like going to sleep as a highly skilled bricklayer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have spent 10 years laying every single brick perfectly by hand.
Mixing the mortar just right.
Yeah, taking pride in the manual craft. Then you wake up the next morning and you are suddenly an architect expected to direct an army of robot builders.
With zero warning or retraining.
Exactly. You no longer need to know how to mix mortar. But you better know exactly where the load-bearing walls go.
Because the robots will happily build a perfectly constructed bathroom right in the middle of your kitchen if you do not give them the right systemic context.
Which is just a brilliant image. But that is exactly where the role of the builder PM is emerging.
Right. Product managers have always had to speak the language of goals and outcomes rather than precise technical syntax.
So their native language actually aligns perfectly with how AI operates. PMs who lean into these tools are evolving into product engineers.
They run the problem space directly. They separate that messy exploration phase from the focused narrative they hand to the executive team.
Wait, I need to push back on this vision of the future, though.
Go for it.
If product managers are just handing the execution over to AI, aren't we all just becoming glorified middle managers for robots?
The class of professional delegators.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you are not the one actually writing the code or pushing the pixels, how do you evaluate if the work is actually good?
Well, you evaluate it through the judgment premium. You have to totally divorce the idea of quality from the elegance of the underlying code.
So ugly code is fine now.
Honestly, yes. The AI might write incredibly ugly code, but if it solves the business problem and runs efficiently, the elegance simply does not matter.
That is going to hurt a lot of engineering egos.
For sure.
Yeah.
But as a professional delegator, your job is no longer to ensure the thing is built perfectly from a technical standpoint.
Your job is to ensure the right thing is built for the market.
Exactly. The skill shifts entirely to validation. You have to ask the AI better questions and aggressively test its output against reality.
Okay, let's talk about the reality of that output. Because we are handing over this execution to a digital workforce, and we need to look at the massive messes they can leave behind.
The cleanup problem is very real.
Let's pull apart Replit and their agentic workflows. What is fascinating here is the prototype itself becomes the source of truth.
It updates all the artifacts automatically. Think about the traditional software development lifecycle.
Oh, it is a nightmare of documentation.
Right. You write a requirements document. Then a designer interprets that and builds a Figma file. Then an engineer interprets the Figma file and writes the code.
Keeping those three different artifacts synchronized is nearly impossible.
Because if the engineer changes a feature due to a technical limitation, the Figma file is suddenly out of date.
But with an agent-first workflow, you bypass that entire translation loss. You build the prototype directly with the AI.
The prototype behaves as the specification itself.
So when a change needs to happen, the agent reads the current state of the prototype, understands the new instruction, and alters the code base directly.
It completely frees the human up to focus entirely on decisions instead of manual coordination.
Which sounds like magic.
It is, but it only works if you follow the golden rules of agentic engineering. You have to treat the agents as a core interface.
Meaning you provide them with full capabilities and clean abstractions?
Yes, and most importantly, the right context to act independently.
Okay. Providing the right context sounds wonderful in theory. But human collaboration is inherently messy.
Understatement of the year.
Right. We have Slack threads full of contradictory decisions, Google Docs that haven't been updated in 6 months, and half-finished architecture diagrams.
Just absolute chaos.
So how does an agent actually navigate that mess?
Well, it doesn't, which is exactly why we are seeing the rise of the TeamOS concept.
The team operating system, like what we are seeing with Claude Code.
Precisely.
Hmm.
AI-native teams are moving away from scattered communication and forcing everything into a shared repository.
So the humans maintain a clean repository of context, structured decision logs, clear architecture rules.
So that the agents can read that repository and figure out what to do without hallucinating or constantly asking for clarification.
I have some genuine skepticism about this TeamOS functioning perfectly in the wild, though.
Why is that?
Think about your own tech stack at work. Most company drives are basically a massive digital junk drawer.
Oh, they are a disaster.
Right, so I imagine deploying an agent into that environment is like buying an incredibly powerful automated vacuum.
Okay, I see where you're going.
It cleans your kitchen flawlessly, but it also aggressively rearranges your living room furniture because it completely misunderstood the layout of the house.
That is actually the perfect analogy.
How do you prevent the AI from just breaking things in its attempt to be helpful?
The vacuum analogy highlights the exact mechanical flaw we are dealing with here. The vacuum does not know the couch needs to face the television.
It just knows it needs to clean the floor under the couch.
Exactly. In code, the AI does not know the business logic behind why a button is blue. It just receives a prompt to make a button.
So it might completely break your overarching design system to achieve that immediate isolated goal.
Yes. That is the core of the cleanup problem.
And that cleanup problem is magnified by how these models actually process information, isn't it?
Heavily magnified. I think a lot of people have a mental block when it comes to context windows and token limits.
They just assume the AI remembers the conversation like a human coworker would.
Which is a huge mistake. Large language models have absolutely no memory. They're completely stateless.
So every single time you send a message, you are not continuing a conversation.
No. You are handing the AI a brand new document that contains every single thing you have ever said to each other in that thread, plus your new question.
Wow. So it reads the entire history from scratch every single time just to predict the next word.
Every single time.
Which means if your team OS is full of garbage and your chat history is incredibly long, you are forcing the AI to read a confusing, contradictory novel every time you want a single line of code.
And the waste there is astronomical because the processing limits are based on those tokens, not the number of messages you send.
So efficient habits become absolutely mandatory. You have to edit your prompts, bash your tasks.
You have to constantly prune the context you are feeding the model. AI might make someone a 10 times programmer, but it comes with 10 times the setup, coordination, and cleanup.
The manual labor did not disappear, it just shapeshifted.
Exactly. You used to type the code, now you curate the context and clean up the inevitable sprawling mess the AI creates when it hallucinates a bad assumption.
Which, yeah, is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. We have these incredibly powerful agents writing code at lightning speed, leaving a trail of digital mess we have to constantly manage.
It is a completely new paradigm of stress.
But here's the really wild part. Because the AI is doing the heavy lifting, building the software is easier than it has ever been in human history.
Oh, without a doubt.
The actual crisis is that building something that survives the market is harder than ever.
Because the barrier to entry has evaporated entirely. If any person with a decent prompt can spin up a functional application over a weekend, the intrinsic value of simply having working software drops to absolute zero.
So we have to draw a hard boundary between commercial products and internal tools.
We do. An internal tool just needs to solve a specific functional bottleneck for your team. It doesn't need to be pretty.
But a commercial product must win a market. It has to outperform a sea of alternatives that are also being built at lightning speed by AI.
And winning a market requires rigorous product discovery. You have to figure out what people actually want.
But from what I am seeing, that discipline is completely breaking down right now.
It is falling apart. Teams see how fast the AI can write code, so they just start building. They skip validation entirely.
They ignore user learning. They stop testing ideas early with real evidence because the cost of building the wrong thing feels so low.
But the cost isn't the code. The cost is the wasted attention.
Mate, that is such a crucial point. Startups are pivoting their entire business models because of this.
Look at a company like Rocket.
Right. They are offering McKinsey-style strategy reports at a fraction of the cost, just to help founders figure out what to build in the first place.
Because the code is trivial now. The strategy, the product discovery, the actual insight into human behavior, that is what people are willing to pay for.
It all comes down to distribution and attention. I was looking at that app Lovable that blew up.
Yeah, that is a perfect example.
They did not win because they had fundamentally superior AI models or better back-end architecture. They won strictly on distribution.
They understood how to capture attention, how to make the product inherently shareable.
And how to dominate the conversation in a really crowded space.
Yeah.
But getting the attention is only the first hurdle.
Once you get them in the door, AI creates this massive psychological trap for retention.
The software as a service activation trap. Let's unpack that.
Well, AI allows you to give a user instant value the second they sign up. They press a button, the agent does all the work, and they get a finished result instantly.
Which is great, right? You would naturally assume that instant gratification creates incredibly loyal customers.
You would think so, but it is the exact opposite. If the user remains entirely passive, their retention absolutely plummets.
I compare it to hiring a brilliant personal chef who can cook your favorite dinner perfectly in 5 seconds flat.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Right. It is mind-blowing the first time it happens. But because you never have to chop the onions, because you never learn your way around the kitchen, you have zero personal investment in the process.
You are just a consumer.
Exactly. So the second a slightly cheaper automated chef comes along, you fire the first one without a second thought because you have no psychological attachment to the experience.
That is a fantastic way to look at it. We value what we help build. It is the classic IKEA effect applied to software.
If the product does everything flawlessly with zero input, the user never accumulates any context within the system.
So the most resilient products figure out how to turn that early magical AI value into a sustained habit by injecting positive friction.
They require the user to take action. They create return triggers.
Think about how you actually inject that positive friction in practice.
Right.
You don't just give the user the final output.
You give them a draft, and you make them curate it.
Exactly. You ask them to organize their preferences So their manual labor creates a unique data set that makes the algorithm hyper-tailored to them.
Ah, so if they leave your app, they don't just lose a tool, they lose the highly personalized assistant they actually spent time training.
The switching cost becomes massive. The New York Times is executing a fascinating version of this strategy in an AI-saturated world.
Oh, yes, because they know they cannot compete purely on raw information retrieval anymore.
Right. An AI agent will always be faster at summarizing the news, so they are betting heavily on human expertise and trusted brand authority.
And bundling their journalism with deep lifestyle habits, they are wrapping the news in daily rituals.
The crossword puzzles, the recipes, the games.
Wordle alone probably saves their retention numbers. They are making the product an indispensable part of your morning routine.
You avoid the passive user trap by making the technology a bridge to a human habit, rather than trying to replace the human experience entirely.
You need users with skin in the game. But scaling that philosophy up to an enterprise level is where the real friction happens.
Oh, enterprise is a whole different beast.
If individual workers are moving at this hyper-accelerated pace and the markets are this volatile, how are traditional companies and massive agile frameworks handling the strain?
The short answer is they are structurally collapsing under the weight of it.
Let's look at the Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe, which is essentially the operating system for countless major corporations.
The entire premise of SAFe is predictable delivery.
Right. You get 100 people in a room for program increment planning. You map out your dependencies, align your teams, and lock in a predictable release roadmap for the next 3 to 6 months.
Which is fundamentally incompatible with AI development.
Completely. AI demands continuous experimentation and rapid course correction.
The capabilities of the underlying models are literally changing weekly. If you lock in a 3-month roadmap based on what an AI model can do right now, well, a new model drops next month, and your entire architecture plan is obsolete.
SAFe requires rigid adherence to a plan, which blocks the exact fast iteration that makes AI useful in the first place.
It is wild to watch companies try to force it.
It is like trying to navigate a high-performance speedboat through a hurricane, but management is demanding you strictly adhere to a printed train schedule.
The mechanics of the vehicle and the reality of the environment simply do not match the governance model.
And because the governance is failing, AI starts acting as a massive dysfunction multiplier within these organizations.
That is a great term for it. Because teams are ultimately shaped by their demand mix, right? The specific types of work and pressures they are asked to handle.
And AI does not change your demand mix, it just accelerates it.
Exactly. If you have a highly autonomous team with a culture of rapid learning, giving them AI makes them learn at light speed.
But if your team is a chaotic mess of misaligned priorities and terrible communication,
the AI just automates the chaos and scales it infinitely.
Which leads directly to the most disruptive trend happening in corporate tech right now. Bring your own AI.
Shadow IT on steroids.
Truly. Employees are looking at the heavily restricted, compliance-approved tools their companies are providing, realizing those tools are completely useless, and just bringing their preferred, highly capable agents from home to do their work.
Corporate IT departments are terrified about data security and intellectual property leaks.
But they are powerless to stop it without destroying the productivity of their best people.
Because if they ban the good tools, the talent just leaves.
It makes complete sense from the worker perspective, though. Imagine working on a highly regulated construction site.
With all the safety checks and red tape.
Yeah, and management hands you a manual screwdriver because it is literally the only tool that passed the safety audit.
Meanwhile, you have a high-powered electric drill sitting in your truck that can finish the job in 10 minutes.
Of course you are going to sneak the drill onto the site. You want to do good work, and the corporate hammer is fundamentally useless.
But when companies do finally sanction these powerful tools, it introduces a really profound tension between legibility and legitimacy.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, AI makes an organization hyper-legible to management. Suddenly, every single action is perfectly measurable.
Ah, I see.
The system can track how many tokens a developer is using, how fast they resolve complex problems, the exact communication patterns between teams. The company becomes perfectly visible and efficient on paper.
Look, I am going to push back hard on that being a good thing. Making an organization perfectly visible to management sounds like an absolute nightmare for team morale.
It definitely can be.
Does perfect legibility inevitably turn the workplace into a surveillance state? Because if I know an AI is summarizing my coding speed and sending it to a dashboard for a director to review, I am going to start optimizing for the metric instead of actually solving hard problems.
And that is exactly where legitimacy has to balance the scale. A system can be perfectly legible to management, but if the workers feel it is unfair or weaponized, it loses all legitimacy.
Trust is just gone.
Right. Visibility is neutral. How the power is applied determines the culture. If the AI visibility is used to help a developer identify bottlenecks in their own workflow so they can get home earlier, that system has legitimacy.
Because the worker actually consents to it.
Exactly. They see the benefit.
But if management uses that exact same visibility to automatically penalize someone for spending 2 days thinking through a really complex architecture problem without writing any code, it becomes a surveillance state.
And the trust evaporates instantly. And once trust evaporates, your most talented people leave, taking their hard-earned judgment with them.
Which brings us completely full circle.
Oh.
We are delegating the execution to these autonomous agents. We are spending our days cleaning up the digital messes they make. We are desperately trying to build products that command human attention.
And we are fighting our own legacy corporate structures to make it happen.
The technical execution skills are rapidly commoditizing. The human ability to synthesize chaos, to decide what actually matters, and to navigate the complex politics of an organization.
Those are the skills commanding the absolute highest premium.
We are in this strange transitional window where human judgment is the most valuable currency we have left.
It is a fascinating time to be building software.
It really is. So I want to leave you with a slightly uncomfortable thought to chew on as you go back to your desk. If AI is successfully taking over all the manual execution and our entire value is based on our judgment.
What comes next?
Exactly. What happens to our tech careers when the agents eventually get good enough to start judging our judgment? I am your vocal technologist. Keep questioning the tools you use and keep pushing back on the defaults. Catch you next time.
Spoken Tech for your ears.